All right, welcome to the Node API meeting on November 28th. And we are going to start with our code check. Okay, here's my screen now.
Yep.
Cool. Um, Starting with the done list, we then did the fixed data race in the stash function yesterday. And I think this was landed weeks ago, right? Yeah, it was landed last week. Cool. So we have closed-system array experiment we support now. And another noticeable thing is that we published a new version in Node API headers. It's a minor change, moving the type definition from the API headers to the type headers.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a convenience change in the Node core repository. So no new features. Yeah. That's kind of the release. Anything else in the down list that's worth mentioning? I think probably not. There's a documentation edition in the Node.js core about using add-ons in the single executable applications. So that is, we can use add-ons in the Node.js single executable applications. This is a guideline on how we can do that. So in case people are interested in that, that'll be a good document. I think that's all in the down list. Cool. Before we jump to the list of the in progress, are there any issues or pull requests that people would like to bring up first?
Yeah, thank you. There have been a couple of pull requests about changes and tests for embedding. Like, thanks for landing one of them, and I think another one is still in progress.
I think that's not in the NPI project board.
Yeah, I just
Um,
put tests over there, but the prefix I didn't put Node API up there. But it's technically was part of the work, which then I start to work on this embedding APIs and stuff, and I just faced
right.
issues that I couldn't even debug stuff.
Yeah, I think it's not a Windows specific issue because the debug build also crashes on other platforms. The reason that it was not crashing before is because we didn't test the debug build in the debug build. So that's probably the reason that it was not crashing before. And basically, we were using the release build in the debug tests. So yeah, but anyway, um, thanks for the fix. I think I'm going to fix the test script to use the correct build type. Um, so basically, we are going to use the debug build when we specify debug build type in
Mhm.
tests. So that should reflect similar failures if in the future.
I wonder why
Um,
why your change did not have any failures, even without my fix.
because we didn't run debug build tests in GitHub Action. You see that we didn't run the Jenkins CI on this
Oh, okay,
request
okay.
yet. So GitHub Action only runs a preliminary subset of our test suite. So it's kind of like a quick verification of the patch. And after the GitHub action, all the tests that have been passed, we will run the Jenkins CI test. And on Jenkins, we will run the full test suite on various platforms, including the platforms that are not supported by GitHub Actions. So like AIX, Solaris, different platforms that are supported by Node.js but not supported by GitHub Actions. So that also includes debugability because it takes a lot of time to build and test. So we don't want to wait like um spend a lot of like resources on GitHub Actions to run debug tests. That's kind of like consideration on the how to spend resources wisely. But
Do you
anyway,
know if
yeah,
does a Node.js project have to pay for using GitHub Actions, or how does it
no,
work?
that's paid by GitHub. We don't pay that. So GitHub Actions will run on every commit on GitHub once you push into the pull request. So that's kind of like trade-off to see how many tests that we are going to run on every commit that you push on a pull request. But for the Jenkins CI, because it's triggered manually, so the frequency of the Jenkins CI is much lower, which means the resource is more constrained and we have more control on the Jenkins resources. But also the Jenkins machines are hosted by Node.js project, which is also sponsored by other, which is also sponsored by major um, s- um, supporters. So it's not free, but yeah.
Just kind of system relative is kind of complex, and if GitHub pays for actions, why not to have everything in actions? Like, I don't know. I'm kind of
Well,
on my
um,
project right now. I'm doing some building pipelines. That's why I kind of just curious why
an
Node.js project organized this way.
another
So
reason is that
out of scope.
GitHub Actions is not controlled by Node.js project, and they don't support every platform that we support. So
Oh, I see.
that's
Okay.
why we only run a subset of test on GitHub Actions.
Okay, it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, I think I will land this pull request. I think I can land it tonight. Um, after 7 days because there's only one approval. And then I will rebase this pull request and run the full Jenkins test suite. Yeah, thanks for the fix.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. I think we don't have any updates, and Koran is not here today, so maybe we can defer this one.
Yeah, I would like to
And
discuss today changes into this minimal embedding C API. We updated it last week,
yeah, sure.
and last time I mentioned that I would like to do some changes in naming. So instead of naming like node embedding API.h, I propose to use name like node runtime API.h. So in this case, all functions would have like prefix node underscore RT. Uh, so technically, kind of my kind of line of thought was actually if you think about C++ API today for Node, it's actually just node.h, right? We're not saying node underscore embedding. We're saying
Yeah,
just .h. Like so technically because embedding it means like its main like a node runtime thing is. So in other day we discussed like I don't really like this name embedding in every single prefix. But what if we're using effectively some kind of node runtime? But runtime for prefix is a little bit too long, so let's make it shorter to node.rt. So thankfully, you see now function called node underscore rt underscore main, node.rt main. I'm just curious, guys, what your thoughts about this approach. You see the header files now called on the left-hand side, it's called like node runtime API. So pretty much we're saying we would like to host node runtime, and this is API to host node runtime.
Um, I think one concern might be that the terminology runtime is pretty overloaded. So, um, it's like you can see runtime, the name runtime everywhere. And embedding is like more, fo it's more, um, specialized
Okay,
term
yeah.
for embedding Node.js in other applications. Um, I personally would prefer embedding if possible. Um, but I would also open to other convincing terminologies. And I can see the argument that this could make the API name shorter, which is reasonable.
Yeah, this node RT is like yes, from one hand, it node. Second, like RT is very just two letters. It's like really to the point. It's actually it's way shorter than we used to have like a node embedding. It was like really really long. You just type it and you already half the screen already gone. All function
Yeah,
so long.
another alternative is like, can we still name the API to be embedding API, but like we name the header to be like node embedding and have the API name to be something shorter like node RT or node embed or or something.
We can just I know like it's a little bit kind of radical change, but you don't like so technically even for Node API, our kind of header file name is actually node API.h. If
Right.
you think from the point of view like it's so generic, right? Like so this way like I know that we get used to this embedding things, but it's like if you think like if you step back a bit, like we talk about like some API for the whole runtime. So if let's put it this way, like what is node.js? Node.js is a runtime for JavaScript, right? A specialized runtime for JavaScript. And if we have something like a Node runtime API, we're pretty much saying this is how would you use this Node runtime in your application.
I
Because embedding is just kind of, if you like, it's one of the scenarios like you for API. But for example, we didn't name Node API as like Node module API, right? We didn't say something like this or like extensive. We didn't name it node extensibility API. I say this way. It's not even about modules, it's about extensibility, right? So technically, here's the same. Embedding is like extensibility would be a part of our header file.
mm, and anyway, I think I will post the options that we have on the issue to see if we can get a consensus on the new name or if people prefer anything else. That's kind of like name backshedding. Um, I think name backshedding is always like um, we can discuss on the issue. But I personally don't have strong preference if it's runtime or embedding. Um, yeah. Is the pull request ready for review now?
Yes, this one is like it's full. Like technically, we do have tests, we have updated documentation. Pretty much, it's all in. What? Sorry, oh, I'm confused.
This has test. It's just in that embedding folder, which is collapsed.
Oh, yes. Because it's supposed to have everything like and because I remember like a discussion was like how we can bring a part of this bigger whatever is embedding API changes and just to, for example, I started with testing stuff and things. So I did these changes. I kind of proposed to author they merged stuff to the change. So pretty much I did that. Uh, oops. Yeah, like JavaScript a little bit refactored in a way that we can actually use the same JavaScript tests across C++ and C. And maybe there are some formatting issues, but this Node API internal was added there to Jeep mostly just because it was missing there. It's not a big deal, but technically, whenever you generate, say, Visual Studio, what I found that Visual Studio project is missing this Node API internal.h file.
Cool.
It was just inconvenience.
Thanks for the work. I think this has been a long-standing request. Thank you for keep working on it. Yeah, and please take a look on it as well if you have time. I think I will take a look on it once, um, after the meeting.
Yeah, I guess like a lot of there are few things to work around, like how to test, how we name stuff, and it works all stuff. I already gonna start to work on this bigger kind of pull requests for kind of the rest of the APIs because this one is just a single function. But we can actually, if these principles what we propose about naming and stuff work out, then we can just simply add additional stuff pretty quick.
All right. Cool.
Thanks. And you said you're going to create some kind of issues to discuss names, right? So, because technically, definitely, it will be nice to discuss a broad audience in node.js project. I don't know
Mm,
how to approach it best.
I would
um,
probably just ask in this
yeah.
so that it has the most visibility.
All right. I think it will be best to discuss on this thread, and there are more, the necessary context are already available in the thread.
Okay.
All right. Cool.
I was also helping a bit. Like there is another developer jumped on this pull request, asking about why when we're using libnode something doesn't work, and I was surprised that some developers, instead of using normal zip compilation stuff, they have some kind of created different framework and different rules which we apply inside of node zip. They're not necessarily being used by other frameworks. Uh, yeah, the whole thing about like being loading modules in case of if we use an embedded node like node libnode DLL, it's a little bit fragile because it technically depends on the module itself. It does not depend on a runtime. Uh, in my opinion, it's a little bit wrong. I was thinking about how to improve it, but I don't have good ideas yet.
Cool. Anything else to talk about this one?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for working on it. Yeah, for anyone, please take a look at the progress, and if you have any different opinions about the naming, please raise it on the progress as well. Yeah, thank you very much. Um,
Yes, I saw your comments on this one. I put it back to draft status. It makes sense to change the test here since this is what incorporates it. So hopefully when I get home tonight from work, I'll be able to add that and I'll
Thank
ping
you.
you when it's added. Yes, and one thing that I noticed is that I did run the Jenkins CI builds, but it does not build experimental version. So none of the, like, it's mostly testing the fact that nothing is changing versus actually testing the new. And there was no Node 25 as well. So I don't really know what's going on there.
Um, okay. I think, yeah, I also made an issue to ask the Jenkins, the Node.js build working group to update the Jenkins job and the 25 option. And I think have, do we have the experimental test
Yeah, we
in
have
the GitHub option?
experimental here. Yeah, in GitHub Actions, we have experimental, just not in the Jenkins. So I don't know if
Right.
maybe it's acceptable, but just something that I wanted just to point out.
I think we rely in Node add-on API, we rely on GitHub action more than Jenkins in the past. So I
Yeah,
think it's probably fine.
I don't think we have not like required the Jenkins builds to be successful in order to merge because sometimes we don't even run them, we don't start them. I just wanted to add something while we were waiting, and then that's when I saw that it was not even worthwhile, to be honest. So, but yeah, the experimental and the standard, it does run here, and they have different, like the test has different outputs depending on whether it is um, running in an experimental mode, because then it can actually test the APIs versus when it's standard, it would output saying that it was skipped. So it's easy to tell that it's running. Yeah. But I'll work on those test changes and I'll let you know when it's added.
Cool. Thank you. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a pretty it should be a simple change like adding a shader buffer here um and add a test like here.
Mm-hmm.
So it should be straightforward to update that. But anyway, thanks for taking a look at this.
Yep.
Right. So this test was originally designed to be easy to add new cases, like you should name the positive values and negative values. So that should be it.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Cool. Thank you. Um, okay. And there's a new pull request for adding an API set prototype function. Um, I think the last time I checked on it, the CI was failing, and we are probably going to wait for the author to get back on this. Um, but the pull request should be mostly good, except from the test filling. So please take a look at it. And yeah, I think that it's a pretty simple functionality anyway. Yep.
But do you think we should use whatever we usually kind of we're saying for new Node API, we're using this Node API prefix versus an API prefix? Uh,
Right, that's a very good point. Would you mind commenting on the progress?
okay.
Yeah, that's what I said, and we can see that he updated the header here in this first file. It says Node API, but
Yeah,
then it doesn't there. So interesting.
right.
Maybe it's the reason why test failing, right? Oh yeah, I see the header file is updated, but all other kind of users just not. It's no wonder why
Yeah,
it's failing.
Yeah,
Okay,
not really happy.
okay.
okay. Would you mind commenting on the progress?
Sure, because I put that as a issue before, so I'll just highlight it again.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's it. We have these two issues. Should be addressed by this pull request. And let's see if there's anything new. I think this one should be ready for another look. I'm going to check it up. Anything new in the list that we should talk about before we jump to the to-do and need to charge list? All right. Okay. So the last time I checked with Miguel, and I think that we should probably put the API create object with properties method to not add-on APIs as well. So he created this issue to keep track of it. But yeah,
Mhm.
I don't think there's anything new in the to-do list other than this, right? Um, there's a sim there's a document change in the Node API headers. Because we published Node API version 10 a while ago, but the Node API headers documentation was not being actively maintained because we usually just merge the automated header updates. We don't usually update the documentation. So I removed this um, version line in the documentation because people can always know that the headers are always up to date. So there's no reason that we should name the version here in the README.
Mhm.
So, and I also directed the team member list to the ABI stable node because that list is more up to date about the team members.
Mhm.
So this should help us to keep the maintenance code on the Node.js headers to be um, lower, and we don't have to
Right.
keep like oh keep an eye on the README about the Node API headers from day to day. Anyway, yeah, that's kind of the documentation change. Please take a look.
Mhm.
And this is a new one. Um, I
More
think
inheritance stuff. Okay.
right. So I think I can explain a bit about why we are missing the super operations in Node API because the Node API derived from V8 C++ API a lot. So when there is no viet C++ operations, we usually do not expose a similar functionality in Node API. Um, Even though the feature might be available in JavaScript, but we don't like map one-to-one features from JavaScript to C++. So that was the original reason that why we don't have such functionality in Node API. Um, but we could definitely explore how we can do it in Node API, but I will suppose that we will need to look into if it's possible with the current Viet API.
I vaguely remember something about the reason we don't have inheritance is because we do not have a node API value that corresponds to a function template. And when you're
Right.
doing inheritance, you need a function template instead of a function. And function template is V8 specific. So we said
Yes.
or something like that because it's been coming up. It's come up a couple of times. I also think like, there is like you have maybe like a draft pull request on Node add-on API for yes, and it's been coming up many times from multiple people whether they I guess it's because there's so many different avenues when we just say inheritance, whether it is a JavaScript class inheriting from a native class or a native class inheriting from a JavaScript class. It's sort of a very big bubble, and
Yeah.
there's a whole different use cases here, but I can't recall exactly which ones we've tried or said that are not possible or something, something, something. I don't know. So for this issue that was just added, just created, how is that different from what?
Um, so for this issue, the original motivation was that to allow a C++ class to extend a JavaScript class, which could be like event emitter or event target.
Mhm.
And in Node.js, these two classes are defined in JavaScript, so they don't have C++ representatives. And um, that is the exact reason that you said that about the function template, which even in V8, function template does not allow extending a JavaScript class in native class. So a native class can only extend a native class or a specific set of V8 predefined JavaScript class, for example, error or array, because at the time that we define the function template, we don't have like event emitter or event target available. So it's more complicated than the supercode because I assume that when you are trying to get your supercode here in the native class, you should already sort of have the class hierarchies being addressed. But in V8, usually the native classes are defined with function template, as you mentioned, and they don't use JavaScript super codes. Instead, they use C++ classes to reference their super classes and their super methods. So that's the reason that why V8 does not provide um, C++ API to do the super operations. Um, well, they are not the same issue, but I think it's a pretty close field that um, how can we do like proper class hierarchies, JavaScript class hierarchies in C++? Um, I would say that it's not that easy, but might be worth to take a look at on it if it's possible. I cannot say that it's not possible right now because I will need to take a look in Vite API to see if it's possible already.
Hmm. And by class hierarchy, you mean a C++ class, a native class extending a JavaScript class?
Right.
Yes, okay. Hmm, okay.
So if you are extending a native class, you should already be able to reference its C++ class and code the C++ methods directly, right? But
Mhm.
I need to think more about this and how we should do that properly.
Well, even with a native class trying to extend a native class, we don't have that capability if you're using like the Node AP, NAPI defined class. Like if you create two NAPI classes, Node API classes, there's no way to get one to inherit from the other, at
Right.
least not with our current APIs. So there's maybe when you're talking about extending native classes, are you talking about extending the V8 classes?
Um, no, I think I conflated the Node.js internal implementation with the Node
Okay.
API. So yeah, I think as you are right, we don't have inheritance in Node API anyway. What I was saying that is that in Node.js core, if a class is extending another class in native in C++, it should be able to refer to the C++ class directly without using
Hmm.
the super operations in JavaScript.
I see. Yeah. And since, like, if we wanted to have the inheritance of a node API class inheriting another node API class, that does not exist. And theoretically, the API that if it did exist, the 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 usage of the API, like it should be the same as having a defining a native class that would extend a JavaScript class, because I could imagine that you just are passing into it an API value that corresponds to the class constructor, maybe. But then I think that's when it comes problematic because the function templates or something. Yeah, I don't know. Um, but if we wanted to start looking somewhere, where would you recommend we we start?
Um, I think as always, to add a new node add-on API, we will need to look into if it's possible in the current V8 API and other JavaScript engines native C++ API, not only JavaScript APIs. So we'll need to see if it's possible to do it
Hmm.
in V8 and in other JavaScript engines.
Hmm.
I would doubt that they would expose the full JavaScript class operations in native land because it's too complicated to be correct.
Yeah, for some reason, I believe like in the past, I saw some pull requests coming from Gabriel. It was probably never merged, but for some reason, I believe he had something in works about it.
I remember his pull request ran JavaScript code from native, like using the eval string or something like that. It was very hacky, even in like the way that he described it. It was kind of hacky and more of like a proof of concept.
I see.
But yeah, and that was years ago because it's been pretty much asked a lot. And it's kind of just been to the state where, from our initial investigations, we can't really do it. But here, with this here, calling super, they seem to have already, like, what function you want to call because it is apparently um, like the base prototypes constructor and passing into it the target your existing target, um, which is different than figuring out how to handle inheritance with a because what you would want to possibly do is in your native constructor, you want to be able to get your parent class's constructor so that you can chain it as a super call. And I don't know how to, yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but because here in this call super implementation, he's already passing to it the derived classes, the super call, an API value this equals call super and super class. Whereas what we would want in, because like when you're writing JavaScript with ES6 classes, you just say super, right? And it knows how to get to the whatever your parent is.
Yeah,
And in that same equivalent manner, if it was going to be in native code, this call super would not reference super class. It would just be able to know that I need to call my parent class's constructor somehow. And I don't know how that would be looking.
Yeah, let's do some research and can discuss the next time. I think like this issue been raised a few times before, and we were saying, we should do it, we should do it, but we never actually did it. But people asking about it again and again.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just figure out. But the only kind of thing that we should not expose, like you said, VA template. Even internally we use it, we should some kind of try to avoid it. The question like how we can actually implement the whole thing without exposing some V8 guts, so technically people can implement on top of other JavaScript engines.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to put it in the to-do here.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, Put This issue, I, I saw that Ramir is already commenting on the issue, and the author says they will come back to see if there's anything new. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
what I mentioned a little bit earlier that it seems like there are some additional frameworks which people use to compile extension modules. In this case, with some kind of bare framework. I don't know, and it's first time I heard about it. It sounds like it's huge. It's a lot of code there and stuff. And it seems like about a year ago, it was some change done inside of Node.js to account for libnode DLL, at least on Windows side. And but it's not something what been done. If you click on this hooks CPP file, this is how on Windows side, then we do with delay loading. We pretty much say we can either use whatever a current executable file, or we can try to use this libnode DLL. So in this case, we can find all this Node API bindings there. I have no idea how this stuff is supposed to work on Unix or Linux side or like Mac OS side.
Um, I think this is Windows only. So on macOS or Linux, they will try to find the symbols on the current running process image first. So you don't have to specify any locations to find the symbols as long as, for example, the if it's the node.exe or libnode.dll that's trying to load the add-on.node, the missing symbols on the add-on node, for example, the node API symbols, the linkers will try to find the symbols on the process running image first, so they don't have to look into. So for sure, this is a Windows specific issue.
Right, but if you think about the whole problem, it's much more interesting. Like for example, say I have let's say I have Windows application, right? And I'm running React Native, and React Native internally may use, say, different JavaScript engines. I can use V8 JavaScript engine, or I can use libnode. I can use uh, Hermes and so on. So technically, imagine if I have like multiple DLLs which can potentially expose Node API, and I'm all in same process. And the whole problem about using the right DLL to take them from becomes much more complex.
No, in that case, you could probably customize this load exe hook to to direct the add-on to look symbols in different files.
But think about like this specific code is actually part of your module. So like if somebody distributes node modules in precompiled form, you as a host application, you have no control over it.
Right. Like, are there any guidance from Microsoft how they would help people to address similar issues?
Um, the only thing comes to mind, like one thing, like it's do something more like instead of having like all these different standalone functions, uh, potentially have them all be kind of bound into one single V table, if you like. So imagine you have some construct which has all these pointers to all these functions. So in this case, it will be much easier just to take this effectively kind of V table and inject it to your module. This I was thinking one of the kind of line of my thoughts right now. If I wanted to be the whole thing to be controllable from the host application, so kind of scenario, imagine like I just simply load DLL, and instead of just praying that this DLL will find some kind of randomly all these different functions which I give it to you, I'll just simply inject into this thing when I load. So pretty much like today, we call it a special function saying like, what's your a Node API version you want to use, we're just calling this function from this DLL. So imagine that whenever we load DLL, we're just calling this function and we're giving pointer to this vtable to this module saying, this is your set of Node API functions you must use. In this case, it will work on all platforms the same way, and it will completely eliminate all these different shenanigans on Windows or like other platforms, linker works and stuff. It will be all kind of very deterministic, if you will.
I'm not following how this will work exactly. Um, is that implementable in Node.js?
Oh yes, yes, but I just don't know like how against you guys will be again having this vtable. So technically having effectively struct which will have pointers to all Node API functions. Because in my opinion, it would solve so many problems. But I don't know how if you have your personal uh, opinions.
I think it will only address the case that if people want to reuse a compiled add-on DLL shared between different runtimes, that will be the only beneficial case.
It's not only case like if you see like what Cryan did with enabling Node API for React Native, so
Yeah.
in some scenarios, like for some mobile platforms, for example, for Android platform, you can have some weak binding symbols like we do today on Linux platform Node.js modules. We have Android requires that all modules must have a kind of strong linking. So in order to implement it, he has to provide special kind of fake DLL, which he called like a weak node API kind of SO file. And this SO file does some magic binding after that. But in some sense, it's like a workaround issue that Node API itself has, like because we don't allow to have this system where we can have our host application will inject some kind of special hook into each module for to use a Node API. If you like, because I don't care if it will be thrown away, I'm perfect with it. But I can provide a draft if you like for what I meant, how a solution might look like. And if you don't like it, we can just throw it. But otherwise, but at least it will be something to discuss because, like you said, I have something in mind how it's supposed to look like. But you said it's very difficult to understand what I'm saying. I can provide
Y-
some code
Yeah,
examples.
I would assume that this is Windows specific issue.
No, it's not only Windows. It would work
Okay.
across platform because, like I said, issue even on Linux platform will have with all this big symbol binding. This doesn't work today, for example, for Android. For Android, if you already have some kind of precompiled module, you have to do something extra in order to work on Android.
I think as long as the solution does not incur performance penalties on other platforms, that might be acceptable. I think that's
Actually,
the basic requirement.
it actually significantly improved performance.
Really.
Our case, and we had to do Node API binding on C Sharp. One of the biggest issue we had, like imagine every time we want to bind to any Node API functions, and currently we have, if I'm not mistaken, about 136 or 37 functions. We're kind of growing number of these functions. So imagine I have to bind like 137 times by name, and this initial binding, if we do them all at once, it takes forever. So what we do instead, we're doing it on demand. It means like every single call we have to check if we're already bound or not. And all this binding happened by name. But imagine if you have vtable, you have zero time for this binding because it's already bound. You already have all these pointers to these functions immediately. Uh, that's what. So think perf-wise, it will be. I would say it will be totally opposite. Perf-wise, it will be improved with the
That
performance.
sounds interesting. Cool. Yeah, I mean, if you have time to work on to illustrate a viable product, that would be awesome. If we can gain performance improvements on other platforms as well. But yeah, that would be awesome. And right.
Okay, let me play with it, and also in some sense it will be aligned. What if you think about Java and Java GNI? This is what GNI already does it for all these years. It's pretty much, if you think they do have vtable of all these different functions, all these GNI functions, they all bound to vtable. So technically, in some sense, we're not inventing anything here. We're just simply saying, let's do this Java-like GNI approach. And we know it's quite successful for many years, and we're just saying, yeah, we implement a similar thing.
Cool, cool. That's good to learn about. Thank you.
Okay, all right, well, thanks.
All right. I think we are up to time. Thank you, everyone, for joining the call and sharing so much interesting background knowledge. And yeah, I guess I will see you on GitHub and see you next week. Have a good weekend.
Okay,
Bye.
Ciao, ciao. Bye.
bye. Happy Friday.